This crowd rises to its feet. Vaccaro slammed it home. Garland left wing, free ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs Media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo, the official streaming partner of the Cavs. Watch over 350 channels of live sports and TV, including Bally Sports Ohio, without cable. There's no cost and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com/Cavs. The Cleveland Cavaliers went 1-1 since we last recorded, a very disappointing loss against the Portland Trail Blazers, and we now look ahead to a challenging schedule and a challenging stretch for the Cavs overall. Joining me today to discuss all of it is my co-host Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I had a nice little basketball detox this weekend, Justin. I just didn't think about sports at all. Just kind of just, focused in on the family. And I was like, and you were sending all sorts of ideas for this thing and talking points. I'm like, I'm not going to think about this right now. And I didn't. And I'm proud of myself. I successfully compartmentalized for once in my life, buddy.
Well, I'm really happy for you. Not to reveal my process too much, but most of the time when I'm talking to you, I'm really just talking out loud. I'm not looking for your feedback.
Oh, I've always been aware.
Yeah, so, it's not really a breakdown in communication. It's not a breakdown in terms of our process. So it still ended up working out. But yeah, it was a very disappointing loss against the Portland Trail Blazers. I was on live doing one of those playback streams with our buddy Danny Morang, as well as Sean Hyken. Sean, of course, said to say hi. But I thought, you know what, this is going to be nice and relaxed. I went on for the second half, and everything that unfolded, and it was not a lot of fun. The Cavs
I specifically DM'd you during the game and said, I'm glad we don't have to go live after this one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
As the camera was currently on me. I actually read that out to them, which they got a crack out of. But yeah, that was a very disappointing loss. Two games that we kind of had circled as basically, let's call them schedule wins. And they let go of the rope against the Blazers, bounce back against the Pistons. Not the most inspired effort, I would say, in that
Justin,
game.
We really got to get a stop screwing around audio drop. The fact that we don't have one yet is actually, it's podcast malpractice.
It's proof that we are in fact screwing around. But it really felt like that game against Detroit. I was sitting there in the first half, and I think I even said this to our Discord, where it's like, they're going to score 43 points in this half, and I still don't feel like it's good defense, like they being Detroit. The attention just wasn't there, and then it seemed like at some point they just kind of realized, all right, well, we're not going to lose to Detroit. Let's kind of turn it on, and they closed out the game well, and it ended up being a comfortable win. But it was just surprising to go through that stretch after what I really felt was a potential turning point with that Atlanta win, where, you're going up against a very potent offense. Everybody was locked in. The ball was moving incredibly well for the Cavs. Obviously, Atlanta isn't a stout defense by any stretch of the imagination, but, Detroit, as an example, isn't exactly the best defense either. Portland is a lot better than we give them credit for. I think they're 8th in terms of half-court defense, and there were some things that they did in that game to be a little frustrating. But both of those games are games that the Cavs could have and should have comfortably had, and it really felt like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, it's just weird, man. Kind of just feels like this team hasn't quite found their gear. They haven't quite found any kind of consistency as of yet. And like, I was driving to go run some errands or something, and I was kind of thinking about the team last Friday, and I was like, part of me is like, yeah, they're showing it. They've shown their upside, and that upside feels really, really good. And then, so I'm like, maybe they, maybe I'm being a little too hard on them. But then, like, I kind of settled back into like, hey, part of, like, every team shows flashes. They have good quarters, good 2-period, good stretches, good runs. I mean, when the Cavs were at their worst, they showed flashes. Like, good teams are supposed to consistently show those flashes. Good teams are supposed to consistently, perform. And I just think they haven't found it yet. And I think they are a good team, but like, they do have to prove that they are a very good, as good of a team as I thought they were at the beginning of the year. They just haven't done that yet.
I'm going to push back just a little bit because what you're saying is in fact right, but we do have.
Well, thank God we were pushing back.
Yeah, it's like it's technically right, but I don't think you're correct because yes, all teams do show flashes, right? Like Portland, it's frustrating to lose to them, but they were also up. The game prior, they were up 26 in Milwaukee, and Milwaukee had to have a furious comeback to win that game, right? Like all sorts of teams will have random flashes and whatnot. But for the Cavs, I don't think the random flashes they've had are just, random schedule.
I'm not saying they are.
Yeah, they've had quality wins, and I feel like they're resting on their laurels with not enough laurels to really, like they haven't proven enough to really kind of be a team that can flip the switch in that way. Like they have so many things that you would hope that they're working on it and working to progress towards. And it really does feel like sometimes they just get away from that, where, you come out, you have a great effort against Philadelphia, you have quality wins against Golden State, and then you just think, okay, well, we can turn it on when we need to against Portland. And the league just isn't at a point where you can do that. And the Cavs have so much trouble when they don't have the focus at the start of the game, flipping that switch. Like they haven't even really demonstrated that ability. And I think a lot of this comes down to just, it's all relative to our expectations, right? Like I think people romanticize the two prior seasons and not to like fact check on air here, but our buddy in front of the podcast, Ken Carmen, was like, didn't they start like 11-1 last year, and the year before that they had a hot start? Well, the year before that they actually started 9-10, and last year they started 8-6. But the difference was 2 years prior, nobody thought they were making the postseason at all. Last year, even after the Donovan Mitchell trade, you had smart people like Zach Lowe and whatnot. Everyone was saying, 7-8 seed, maybe they can avoid the play-in. That would be a great year. And this is the first year, Carter, where it feels like, and they are welcome to prove me wrong, but I don't think that this is a year that the Cavs are going to exceed expectations because the expectations are so high. We want to see this team win a round of the playoffs, and we want to see them push a great team in the second round of the playoffs. That's setting the expectations really high. That's not letting this team off the hook or handling them with kid gloves in any way. And I want to steal a quote from Pascal Siakam that I saw today, because I think it sums up this Cavs season perfectly through a quarter of the year, which was, it doesn't feel like anything is bad. It just feels like nothing is amazing. And that is very much what it's been for the Cavs so far this year.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, it really should feel better, if you told me 20 games in the season, we'd sweep the season series with the Warriors, we would run the Nuggets off the floor, we'd take a shorthanded overtime win against Philly, I'd be like, okay, or we'd win at MSG.
Even beating Toronto, who just always seems to be a mismatch when it comes to the length and style of play.
Yeah, if you told me all those things were happening for the first 20 games, I think I'd say it's pretty good. And like, you look at their record, and 11-9 is not that bad. It's not like a disaster. Mm-hmm. I don't think this team thinks they're a 500 team, but 1 5-game win streak, and all of a sudden the record looks great. I'm not saying those are easy, but they're certainly doable. I do just think, like, I think nothing feels that amazing right now because all the losses just feel real heavy on this team, on this fan base. That loss to the Lakers, again, like a loss against LeBron by 6 should not have felt like the world was ending coming off a 4-game win streak, but it kind of just felt really bad, felt bigger than it was. So I'm not sure why that is. I'm not sure why the vibes feel, so sky is falling after every loss. But like, I feel like there's been more so than years past, kind of like this big, like, come to Jesus after every loss. Yeah, at least since probably that second Thunder game. The early season, I think we all were like, yeah, they're really, 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 really hurt. But they're not really, really, really hurt anymore. They're still banged up, sure, but like they have their starting lineup, like the basic building blocks to be a successful team. And like, I think, the weight of, what we saw after the Blazers, the way that the locker room seemed to react based on the reporting, like, it does feel like the team it does feel like the team kind of is struggling to brush these L's off. Like it feels kind of more important across the board. It's not just, the 7 reactionary fans in my mentions throwing a fit after every loss, which always is going to happen. It kind of feels like even the beat kind of is noticing it. So something is a little amiss. And I think what's really interesting and really hard to do, especially when you're not in the room, but it might even be harder in the room to identify, like, hey, is something wrong here? Like, is there something like legitimately wrong, or are we just having a bad week? Are we having a bad couple weeks? Do we need, like, what is work throughable in the next week? What is going to bother us all season? And like, those are the kind of unknowables that make it really, really hard to run a team, I feel. Cause like, yeah, it's been a weird year. And like, I don't think I felt super great coming out of that Pistons win. Even though they did, obviously end up winning by 9 points. It's perfectly reasonable margin of victory. Obviously the Blazers loss felt very, very bad, but like, it's still a team that's won 7 out of the last 10. I just can't make heads or tails of it, Justin, because there's a lot of stuff that looks good. A lot of the stuff that's bad feels like it should be correcting itself, but yet it's just a little bleh. And like, that's one thing I'll never understand how to read, which is whether the bleh is a problem or just we've been together for a couple years now. We're a little banged up, and things just are, we have a bit of a hangover from a weird end of our year last year. It's really hard to diagnose the severity when you're kind of just outside the room, and I would argue even maybe even harder inside the room, because you have all these flying data points just in your face trying to figure out how to make sense of stuff.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, you and I are fans, right? Like, we are dumb fans that like live and die with all these results. I'm not proud of how much like every single result affects my mood for like the next day or two. Like, it's something that I wish wasn't the case. And when we jump on the podcast mics here, like, I always try to like put everything in perspective, but it's impossible for us to not have some projection, right? When you look at how last season ended with the Knicks series, I think we're looking to come into this year with some sort of like catharsis here. Like, let's get off to a run. Let's just kind of rediscover that energy, rediscover that vibes. And I think honestly, when it comes to the Cavs this season, like, I think if it was a team that was like lost and trying to find its way kind of thing, that would be more apparent when you go up against the best in the league. Like, okay, there's something structurally wrong here. We're not able to perform at a high level. But what I'm seeing is they're getting up for those games. They're performing really well in those games. And it's just almost like a complacency when they go against these teams that they should be beating, or even like the OKC loss. In a vacuum, that's fine. OKC is a great team, but you're up 10 and you think that the game's already put away, and it's like, all right, we've done enough to win. Let's kind of like wrap this up. Honestly, unfortunate luck that OKC just happened to hit every single shot down the stretch, and that coincided with a cold stretch, and obviously you were already shorthanded and whatnot. But I just think that this is a team that when they're at their best, they're stopping the other team from scoring, and they're playing hard on defense because they don't want the other team to score, not because they're down by 7 and they need the stop to come back. They're scoring on the other team and they're executing because they're in love with the process and they're having fun scoring, and they need to get back to that. And I almost wonder if to some extent it's, all right, we already have a little bit of a track record. We've had back-to-back winning seasons here. We won 50 games last year, and we have the most talented roster that we've had during this era. Like, it's almost like having that talent around you, having the shooting Strus and all these other guys, and just the improved play, it almost like gives you that false sense of confidence. And they just really need to get back to the real identity of this team, which is a hardworking group. And when they have their most success, it's by outworking everyone. And when you say, like, why does it just kind of feel off? I think it really comes down to, like, we just need that sustained run to make everybody feel better, to make them feel better. Like, when you listen to the locker room and you listen to like the post-practice quotes and whatnot, I think it comes from these guys holding themselves to a high standard. And the reality is, like, they just haven't clicked for a sustained period of time. They've been dealing with all these nagging injuries. it's probably 10 times more frustrating for them because they're always going to care more than we do. So I think it's just a variety of factors that have contributed to just a weird start to this first quarter of the season.
Yeah, I mean, consistency, but there's also like tangibles here, you know? There's tangible things that you just go like, hey, you got to do X if you want to be what you want to be. Like the team's pace is up. They are playing faster than they did last year. I was, those were kind of the two numbers I was checking. Maybe over-indexing on based on the offensive rating that they put together with these numbers. But
and to back that up, the Cavs are 7th in transition frequency this year, up from 19th last season.
And I believe 17th overall in pace, correct?
Correct.
So they should. It does seem like their half-court possessions are going a little bit faster with a little bit more verve. But last year they took, let's see here, they took, good podcasting, 32.5 threes per 100 possessions. That was 19th in the league. Justin, they added Max Strus and George Niang, and they're taking less. They're down to 24th in the league.
See, that doesn't really move me because like that's so obviously context dependent. We've had we had a game where Garland and Mitchell were out. Garland hamstring injury, Mitchell hamstring injury, LeVert's been hurt. Like we know the context behind
Justin,
all of that.
I'm pushing back here. They were putting up damn near 50 a game in preseason.
Yeah, because they were healthy and they were there. It's not like they were banged up in preseason.
They haven't even approached it this year. Like even their highest volumes have been around 35. They've had a couple games they got up to 40, but for the vast majority, they're in the 30s. And
I just disagree.
I'm not seeing the 3-point volume, and like these are the things where you go like, obviously it stinks that Darius doesn't seem to be all the way healthy and he's not getting shots up, but like, and like I don't know if that's related to the hand or not, but like he's averaging a career low 3-point attempts per 36. Like you cannot replace. You cannot be playing Max Strus, in the high 30s per game, and a small backcourt who's bread is buttered as shooters and be 24th in the league in 3-point attempts per 100 possessions. You just can't. I agree. And if in the last week that number felt way higher, I would be like, okay, they just needed to get the starting lineup back, but like. Their last 7 games, just doing a quick check. Let's see if I'll eat my words live on the pod. They're 25th in 3-point attempts per 36. So like, I'm just not seeing the volume, and like, it's just really, really hard for this team to get back to that top level offense if they're not taking the threes that they need to take, if they're not consistently generating those looks. Because it just kind of requires everything else to be perfect.
Yeah, I agree. But like, I just think you went into that Brooklyn game, first game of the year, 43 attempts in that game. And, after that, Garland gets shut down. Then you're playing without him for a while. Mitchell has the hamstring injury. You're playing without him for a while. LeVert's out. So I agree that it's something. I agree that it's something that needs to change. And to me, like, it starts with Darius, and I'm happy to see that he's back up to like 7 a game over the last 4. Like, to me, that's a positive indicator. And it's also like, it's one of those indicators of, okay, you're starting to take them and you're making them. So now you don't really have an excuse. Like, you need to go out there and take those, because I think it was obvious that the hand was a factor earlier this year. Like the careless passes and whatnot, that's something that he's needed to clean up in the past, and I think has continued this year, especially against trapping defenses and things like that. Sometimes he can get baited into those, but the mishandling of the ball and just like not being confident taking threes, we've wanted to see that 3-point volume go up, and the fact that it was going the other direction, and he's going through the game holding his shooting hand and has a wrap on it for a while. Like, to me, that's an indicator that had to have been a factor. But I completely agree. Like, they need to be better. But it's funny to look at this year where, what were some of the issues last year? Okay, we played too slow. That's been corrected. We struggled on the road. We're 6-3 on the road this season. And a lot of that coming on that West Coast trip as well, which was impressive. But then you look at the half-court offense. They're 23rd in half-court offense. Last year, you were 7th. The strength of schedule net ratings, or strength of schedule adjusted ratings for the Cavs this year, they're 9th in net rating, 3rd in defense, 18th in offense. Obviously, the defense is improving overall. I think they're 8th when you don't account for schedule, and their starting lineup has a positive net rating. But to me, as frustrating as it's been, and as much as I want to see a run with this team, and I still truly believe that there's going to be a run coming at some point here, it is comforting knowing that or at least feeling like this is the floor. Because I feel like they can play a whole lot better than this. And I think that's where you see, when you listen to the interviews with these guys, like that seems to be the sense in the locker room that, hey, we're just starting to get healthy. Guys have been a little nicked up, but at least we have like everybody in the locker room. We have them on the court. Dean Wade was able to practice. No Karis LeVert yet, but getting Dean Wade back is going to be helpful. But as well as some aspects have gone, to me, the biggest area where the Cavs can get better is Garland and Mitchell. And when that's the case, I feel good about it because I know that these are two guys with pedigrees. These are guys that we know how good they are. And I truly believe they can be better. But you look at the last two games, and Garland goes 15 of 41 over those two games. Mitchell goes 14 of 39. That's a combined 29 of 80. Like, yeah, you're going to struggle offensively when your two offensive engines, the heart and soul of the team's offense, are shooting that poorly.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, yeah, in general, it's just not been kind of what you need from them. Whether it's turnovers for Darius, and, you know, a lot of these turnovers are a direct byproduct of his unwillingness to shoot. You know, just driving into a set defense that, you know, was waiting for him to come. Guys kind of going under screens, so he's not even really yielding an advantage on the screen. The finishing hasn't really been where it needs to be either. And then, you know, Donovan just kind of feels like in some ways he is adjusting and starting to play a little bit more within the offense. But you know, as that happens, he gets mired in a horrific shooting slump. So like, it's really hard to kind of figure out, you know, it's just, as I mentioned, a lot of data points, and it's just really kind of hard to figure out what's real and what's not because of that.
And I actually want to give Donovan Mitchell a lot of credit here, because after the Lakers game, we did a podcast and I talked about how 15% of his shots were coming with 0 dribbles prior to the shot, right? And that was down 6% from last year. Since that game, it's up to 32% of his shots have come without a dribble. Like, he is playing within the flow of the offense. He's allowing himself to be set up by teammates. And that was exactly what he said after the Lakers game, right? Like, I need to be more part of it. I can't dominate the ball in the same way. And to me, that's an immediate change over a couple games here. And I think, obviously, you know, is a contributing factor to playing well against Atlanta. The problem is his field goal percentage when on those shots were no dribbles prior to the field goal attempt. He's shooting 30.8% on those looks. Like, that is something that I think is going to regress. But again, that's one of those like process over results thing of, okay, Donovan's making that change. I look at Darius and you look at what he did against Atlanta. I thought that was like a perfect game from him on both ends of the court, exactly what you want to see. There's things that indicate to me that, okay, they can turn this around, but it's just frustrating to not be able to bank some of these wins when you are heading into such a challenging 6-game stretch.
Yeah, and like, I do think like that's like macro stuff. I think like on the micro, they just have to play smarter, and well, maybe this is also macro, but like they can't let that be the reason they don't win. You know what I mean? Like,
agreed.
You should be able to have a bad game against Portland and still win at home. You just should. You know, some guy whose name I cannot remember, it's Reith or something, their backup two-way big man was killing us.
27-year-old,
you know?
rookie, great story.
Like, a lot of like just slop. You know. Like, and that's a focus thing. That's not a. I can handle. I can handle Mitchell missing shots. I can handle even Garland having some issues with injury or just, you know, trying to play a different way and trying to get into the teeth because he feels like that's what he needs to do. I can't handle the sloppy, we're playing a team that's not very good and we're gonna try to put on a show here. There were some stretches in that second quarter where I almost felt like I was watching the All-Star game. like they were trying some audacious stuff because they thought they could, and like they were winning, so it was fine. But when you don't, as I think it was Darius that talked about, like, hey, we got to step on teams' necks. We can't just let them hang around. And like, there's just really is Denver's probably the only game that really felt that way this year, where they were like, they got a lead and they're like, we're not letting this go. We're like, you're not getting back in this. Like Atlanta, I think probably also qualifies for that. So
Atlanta, they had the point differential with the in-season tournament, and to me that was a really interesting dynamic, because it's like, it wasn't a mindset of we've scored enough points for us to win this game, we can take our foot off the gas. It was, oh, we need to continue doing this. So they continued executing, they continued playing hard on defense. And as much as we talk about how the Cavs in the past played with joy, there was also a chip on their shoulder, and there was also a sense of, we're going to prove some people wrong. And I find it interesting when we go into this year where a lot of these games, the games that the Cavs lose, it's not a game that, oh, people were expecting them to lose and they weren't able to prove them wrong. It was, the expectation is for you guys to go out and just handle this one, and they're falling short of that expectation. And to me, that speaks to what Garland was saying, that they need to re-embrace that mentality of stepping on people's throats. And to me, like, as much as
such a violent imagery.
As much as look at us being tough talking podcasters, step on their throats, jump off a cliff with 2 axes. As much as you like that one. As much as we talk about how Garland had to change his profile earlier in the year, and it's understandable with what he was going through, I think we're past that point now. And I really felt like, especially against Detroit, that he just got out of his rhythm entirely and was playing a game I frankly didn't recognize for the first half, where, okay, before he wasn't able to take the same threes the same way, and he supplemented that by being able to get to the line a little bit more and really attacking the basket, and those were all positive changes. But it almost felt like it skewed too far the other way, where he wasn't really even looking to make a basketball play at times, and was throwing up some wild attempts to get bailed out by a whistle, and it just didn't feel like a Darius game. And I guess if you're looking for an encouraging thing from that, I feel like in the past I haven't really seen Darius have a game where he looked disjointed and was able to reel it back in and gain control of the wheel. I've seen him have cold shooting starts where he starts off like 1 of 7 and shoots his way into like a 51-point game like he did against the Wolves. But I haven't seen him be out of control and regain control. And I really do feel like he did that against Detroit. And to me, it's nice that the team has actually been able to have a few days off here, and they're going to be able to have multiple practices. They're able to kind of refine their focus, because it all starts with Garland to me. And I think the bottom line is he needs to play better, and I think it's fair to expect him to play better, because we've seen, even in recent games, him play a more responsible game. We've seen him start to take those threes again, the pull-ups, and it seemed to be a point of emphasis for him getting those shots up against Detroit. We're now seeing him do all of that stuff. Now it's time to get back to who he's been in the past, which is a much, much more consistent player than what we've seen so far this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, it always feels a little reductionist just to say, hey, stars play better. But like, I really do think we're at the point now where the Cavs are getting enough from everyone else to be a really good team. Strus continues to be excellent, even when he is a little cold from the field. I think Mobley and Allen have rounded into form and are giving you good efforts and high quality outputs more often than not on most nights. There's still going to be guard dependent players on the offensive end, but I think they've been putting together really good efforts.
The picks have been great. I think
George Niang, I think, has really settled in. Like, I think he's been giving them good minutes, like for about 2 weeks now, and We're really seeing a lot of good work out of him. Isaac Okoro, I thought, had a really nice game against Detroit.
What a game against Detroit.
And really was like one of the only guys kind of providing that spark for this team. So like there's enough, I guess, is what I would say. There is enough contributions from the rest of the team that if Darius and Donovan start playing well, especially at the same time, one sure would like to see that this team has everything in place to make the run. But like, you're just not going to win a lot of games if your star players are not playing very well. And like, it's kind of an every other game thing right now with both of them, where it's like you're just kind of waiting for them to be like the other stars in the league that are good 5 out of every 6 nights. You know, where like, I'm not saying you can't ever have a bad game, but like they're just not there yet from a consistency this season. You know, Donovan was doing it early in the year, but there was just, you know, there wasn't enough around him. Now everything is now there is enough around everyone. The pieces are in place. Time to go step up to the plate and, you know, get some contact, because like it's just not that we're not getting a lot of balls in play in some of these games.
Yeah, the Cavs dynamic duo absolutely has everything they need to succeed, just like this dynamic duo, thanks to Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Yeah, and again, that's why I sit there with a level of confidence, because I know that both of those guys are capable of doing that. I know how well they played off of one another last year. And like, it's just a matter of when for me. And the anxiety over when has more to do with macro goals and whatnot, but I feel like I can't even really focus on that. And the funny other aspect of this is them playing well just has such a trickle down effect to everybody else on the roster. And especially like against Detroit, I really felt like, as physical as Detroit can play, they were not getting Evan Mobley the ball enough in that game. Like, he just flat out wasn't getting the ball enough, and credit to him, you know, going out there, getting 11 rebounds. Allen had 11 as well. Obviously the defense is phenomenal, but I just felt like he wasn't getting the touches he needed. And man, like, even on nights where, you know, the flow of the game just doesn't go their one of their way, and like Garland doesn't get up as many attempts as he normally does, still usually gets like 12 to 14 attempts in a game, and he's still getting the ball in his hands. And that has to be the case with Evan Mobley. Like, for the long-term health of this team, and especially with how well he's been playing, they got to continue to feed him the ball, and it can't be a situation where just the flow of the game takes him out of it.
As always, you know, Mobley and Allen, their involvement is much more of a symptom of health than anything. You know, means things are working the way they need to work, that the ball is moving to where it needs to go in the offense, that the game plan is being executed. So, you know, that's, I think, why we weren't super thrilled with that Pistons game, because someone like Mobley, I think, only had like 5 or 6 shot attempts in that game. It was really, really low volume because they just weren't finding him. They weren't running healthy offense, and that's what I really want to continue to see them pushing towards. Whether it's rotations, whether it's just, you know, individual play, and but like the offense has just got to be better. Again, there is just no world in which a team that was a top 10 offense last year adds Max Strus and George Niang and plays them a lot of minutes and drops to 23rd.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, speaking of rotations, friend of the podcast, Spencer Davies, did ask JB about his shortened rotation lately. I don't know if you had the chance to watch that interview, but I thought it was an interesting answer he gave, which was basically that the Cavs have a lot of good but smaller players, which makes it harder to go deeper into the rotation and give guys the proper opportunity when those guys are the ones that are available. And to me, that made sense. Like, I look at the recent times Craig Porter Jr. has gone to court. I don't think he's played particularly well. We brought that up on the last podcast in a little more detail, but I think that that's reasonable. But it also, my mind flipped where I'm like, okay, Dean Wade is available to practice here. If Dean and Karras are in the lineup, those guys aren't smalls. And you know, you can go deeper in your rotation. he has to be part of the rotation moving forward if you are going to, stick with the game plan of going 9 or 10 deep. Karis LeVert, Dean Wade, George Niang, Isaac Okoro all have to be playing all of these games, because you look at, Portland and Detroit with Karis and Wade out. The only guys that are really eligible to play that weren't guards are Tristan, Damian Jones, and Amani Bates, if you're going that direction. And I don't believe he was dressed for...
Oh, not guards. Sorry.
Yeah. So, those are really the only options, and you're going with the two bigs. So that kind of rules the bigs out. And if Amani's not with the team, there's not a wing option to go to. So, I hate that we're back at a spot where, we're like, if only Dean Wade was healthy. We do this every single year. And it's not like I would change anything from an offseason perspective of the guys they acquired. Like, shooting was the biggest need. You added Strus and you added Niang. You added some backup fives, which we sorely needed. And adding Tristan's probably won us a game or two at this point. It's just one of those kind of unfortunate things where you get thin at one specific position, and I can see how that would have a trickle-down effect on the rotation itself.
Yeah, and also, I think that's all fair and good, but I think JB is also running a 7-8-man rotation for a reason right now, and it's that he's trying to win games. He's trying to survive the stretch of the season where the team isn't really playing their best ball, or aren't really coming together to play their best ball. And I would suggest, frankly, that when your team isn't playing your best ball, that might be the time to say, hey, I liked what he did in the Detroit game, where I felt like sending Merrill and Tristan in was a bit of a message of hey, we're not playing the right way. I'm going to go put in two guys that are going to play the right way. And I felt like they could have done that in Portland, that only the top 8 guys in the rotation played in that game.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't have minded seeing a little bit of an injection of some chaos, something to mix up the vibe in that game. So I'll give JB a little bit of flowers for that in the Detroit game, because you're probably gonna be running shorter rotations for all the reasons you explained, but if the guys that have earned their spots in the rotation aren't earning them within that game, sometimes you got to just make a little
sometimes
vibes sub. Yeah, a little vibe substitution, and play Merrill or Tristan or CPJ for 6 minutes or something like that. Just to kind of change things up. Tune in Sports in the chat just said, just hope the guys don't get burnt out. I'm not super worried about that. No one's playing more than 37, 38 minutes a night. When JB's doing this, this isn't like the old D'Antoni Phoenix Suns where all 5 starters are at 43 minutes and he's playing 3 guys the remaining 5 apiece per position. You look at that, you look at the Portland game, and the minutes were super evenly distributed. It's just that the bench was also playing heavy minutes. 34, 38, 37, 34, 36, 19, 17, 26. You're just not playing any guys 8 minutes or 10 minutes in this 8-man rotation. So I'm not terribly worried about burnout right now. None of these guys are playing so many minutes that I'm they're gonna start wearing down. But I mean, it's a worthy concern. I'm just not super keyed in on it, because it's not like guys are consistently crossing 40. I feel like even less so this season than last season.
Yeah, I definitely feel like overall, when everyone's been available, the minutes have been really reasonable. We've gotten some good wins where, Mobley and Allen are playing 28 minutes, and that was just never possible last year. But I think it's a fair concern, especially for a team that's been dealing with so many soft tissue injuries, right? Where it's okay, you don't want to wear guys out. I think, obviously against Detroit, it makes some sense because you have 3 days off prior to your next game. You only have 2 games this week. That's going to be a little weird from our perspective. We're used to just cycling through games, but we actually have a little bit of a rest here. And I thought it was interesting. Thanks to Chris Fedor, subscribe to the subtext and all that. He mentioned that today one of the things that the Cavs have been focusing on, and they're going to focus on it again tomorrow, is developing counters and better preparing for switch heavy teams and being able to attack drop coverage for pick and roll. And to me, I find that interesting because obviously we've now seen enough of this group together where we got a better sense of what the Cavs' strengths and weaknesses are, right? I think they've done a good job overall of addressing the offensive rebounding concerns where you're getting more of a team effort. There's times where it lapses, but they seem to know what they're doing there. And that definitely has been, like, when you look at the games the Cavs have lost, yeah, it's not the best teams that they've played, but a lot of times it's okay. They're throwing a lot of length at you. They're throwing switching defense. They're really making life hard for the guards. I thought Kamara did a terrific job from the Blazers on Darius Garland, making his life hell and really limiting the space he had to work with. So better preparing and having those counters ready for those type of situations should help them have more sustained success offensively. But we talk about drop coverage in particular, like that's a spot where Darius just has to take those shots. Like Darius Mitchell, whoever it is, you have to be pulling up. And if it's an extreme drop and the ball's already got into Evan Mobley, he's got to be willing to take that pull up, which to his credit, Mobley's been taking that shot recently.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned the defensive rebounding. They're working on that. I did want to check that real quick. They're at 22nd right now in the league, which is a marked increase from the dead last they were after the All-Star break last year. So I do feel like we're seeing some growth there. And then, yeah, I actually think some of their best success this year has been against drop teams. You look at the way they kind of beat up Denver on those deep drops from Jokic, the way that they were able to generate points against Philly, who employs that drop style coverage. So I certainly think that is going to, but I haven't liked them against switches. And you're about to go play Orlando a bunch. You're about to play Miami. You're about to play Boston. All teams that have really, really proficient switch defenders. Yeah. So I really do want to see kind of how I'm glad they're practicing it because they're really going to need it. Justin, is it hyperbole to say that this upcoming 7 game stretch will kind of define the Cavaliers season?
I'm so happy you brought this up because I was actually going to talk to you about this. And I definitely felt like I was sitting there, I was like, this is a make or break stretch for them.
It just feels really important.
And that's one of those things that we say as fans or as analysts where we're like, this is really make or break. And then I was just thinking about, I was like, well, if they don't do well in this stretch and, they go 500 or maybe one game below, and later in the year, they rediscover their mojo, they play well, it's not really make or break. It's just one of those things that we say when we're like, impatient about the team getting back on track. But I definitely feel like this could have the potential to be a turning point, right? Like I almost feel a little bit better that we're going into this stretch against harder competition because they seem to be getting up for those games, right? And I really feel like, especially after multiple days of practice here, which is a luxury teams don't normally get at this point in the season, they have a chance to really kind of turn a corner and play well over the stretch against teams that give them trouble. Like Orlando is a team that's above average when it comes to offensive rebounds. They force a ton of turnovers, second in the league in terms of opponent turnover rate. They don't give up second chance opportunities at all. They rebound defensively incredibly well, and they defend the three well. Like that, to me, is a team that could give the Cavs a lot of trouble and is one of those kind of styles make fights type of challenges for them. And if they handle that challenge really well, that's something you can actually hang your hat on and build off of moving forward, at least hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on in saying that it probably is hyperbole to say this stretch will define the season. For those that are not aware, the stretch is versus Orlando, at Miami, at Orlando, at Boston versus Atlanta. That's a real tough 6 game stretch with a back-to-back in there and four road games in there, all against good or decent teams. I just think that you're right. It is. I think that it's been a weird vibe season so far, and prolonging that into almost Christmas is a little scary because at some point, front office, coaching staff, they need to start making choices about like what this team is going to be for the year. These are all data points. Like trade
The
deadline.
trade deadline will come up sooner than you think, right?
I was about to make that exact same point. Like it always comes up faster than you think it is. And like, December 15th is kind of one of those magical trigger dates where the leagues, a lot of recently signed contracts start becoming available. And like, you just need to know who and what you are. So like any extension of not knowing who and what you are is a little scary. And like, so the idea of them coming out of the stretch and playing really, really well, like if they go 4-2 in this stretch and, earn a couple more trademark wins and come together on this 4-game road trip, and really start playing connected basketball, then you go, okay, we've got some stuff to figure out. We've got some stuff to build on. And I think going another long stretch without that is a little scary because we're 20 games into the season. We're almost we're at the quarter mark of the season, and they just don't have that stretch to hang their hat on. You kind of thought it was going to be the Portland, Detroit, Denver, Philly 4-game win streak, but then you lose a couple weird ones in there right after. Like, okay, maybe we haven't figured it out. So I do think it's important. I think it's more important than just being 6 games on the schedule, even though logically you are very correct.
That it's 6 games on the schedule.
It's just 6 games on the schedule. But like, I do think it's a cool test and it's an interesting test. If I may be permitted to read my own tweet from about a week ago, I was looking at
segment.
I was doing some homework on Orlando. Don't lean back, you dick. I was doing some homework on Orlando when they had won their 8th game in a row. They were 13-5 without a single player averaging at least 20 points a game, at least 5 assists per game, at least 10 rebounds per game, or at least 2 3-pointers made per game. This is a really cool anomaly of a team that is beating teams by being really big at almost every position, being really physical at almost every position, playing super together on both ends of the ball, and it's really, really cool to watch. And talk about, like, if the Cavs have not been like the most together team on the court, if it doesn't feel like all the pieces are moving in concert with one another, I feel like Orlando is kind of the counterfactual to that, in terms of they're more than the sum of their parts right now, I think, as a team. And I think that's what part of the reason I'm keying in on this stretch so much. I almost care more about these 2 Orlando games than I do about the 2 games in Boston in a weird way. Because it's like, hey, like, look on the other side of the court, see what this team is doing and what's working so well for them, and like recapture some of that scrappy 2021 Cavaliers magic. Because I think that'll really be a very telling indicator for kind of where this team is going.
Yeah, and it's a team that if the Cavs put their best foot forward defensively, I feel like they should have a good shot against this, because you look at what the schedule that Orlando's played, and Orlando's a fantastic defense, but their offense, when you look at schedule adjusted, it's ranked 24th. Their defensive ratings.
What are we schedule adjusted again? 18th or something like that?
18th. Yeah, we're 18th. Their defense is 4th. Ours is 3rd. Like, we should be able to do a good job against them defensively. They also allow a ton of shots at the rim. They're I believe 23rd in terms of frequency of shots given up at the rim. So that should be a spot where
Goga Bitadze is not a deterrent.
Yeah, and maybe that's going to change around when Wendell Carter Jr. comes back. I think he's a phenomenal player that doesn't get his props, and with the rate that players seem to return against the Cavs, I wouldn't be surprised if he played Wednesday. But like, they're going to test you at the point of attack. They have tremendous guard defenders. Jalen Suggs is a terrific guard defender. Markelle Fultz does a great job there. So it is a really, really interesting challenge for them. And I mean, part of why the Portland game is so disappointing is this would feel so much better if we were 12-8. Like, we'd be a half game out of 4th. And the beauty of the in-season tournament, Carter, is almost every team ahead of the Cavs is going to get 1 or 2 losses this week. Like, you know that almost everybody's getting a loss or 2 because they're all playing each other.
Indy might be handing Boston one as we speak. They're up 7 with 8 minutes left.
Right. That's awesome. I really, I've got that game being recorded. I can't wait to check it out. But right, like they're all going to lose, and the one team that's up ahead of you that isn't in that in-season tournament, you play twice right away in Orlando. So you do have a chance to move up the standings and gain some positive momentum. But you just wish they kind of had those other ones in the back pocket. And I do want to return back to the rotations, because I sent this to you prior to the Detroit game, and it's still true with the exception of one lineup. No Cavs lineups, except for one, that have played over 20 minutes this season have a negative net rating. Every single one of them has a positive net rating, including the starting lineup. And to me, that goes to show, one, they haven't had a lot of lineup continuity. They don't have a ton of big minute lineups that have been together. And it also leads me to one of the weird things when it comes to the rotation. The one thing I don't like about the rotation this year is there has been a shift from how we paired the guards and bigs last season. Last season, we started it off Mobley and Mitchell, and we changed that to Garland and Mobley, and Mitchell and Allen. And I talked about this when we had Spencer Davies on the podcast, where I was like, maybe there's some merits to it. Mitchell and Mobley figuring out how they can play with one another. The numbers have just gotten worse of that grouping. When Mitchell and Mobley share the court together without Garland and Allen, they have a negative 8.4 net rating. They played 338 possessions together, which is not that far off the 545 that they played last year. As to kind of, compare that to how Garland and Mobley have been this year, they have a plus 16.7 net rating when they share the court together. And obviously they had a plus 12 net rating last year. Mitchell and Allen this year, plus 5.9 without Garland and Mobley. Last year was plus 8.1. Like, those pairings are working again this year. We're just not going to them as often. And I want to know, Carter, I want to get your honest take on this, because we discussed this a little bit in the Discord when I was looking up these numbers, and some people brought up, hey, this is something that we still do need to figure out. Like, we do have to figure out how Mitchell and Mobley can play together. Mobley needs to become better as a screen setter to really free up Mitchell and make that pairing work better. Mitchell has to be better at finding him in those entry passes. Is that something that you want to continue to stick with, even though it isn't working particularly well, so that you build something and you strengthen a weakness? Or would you like to kind of default back to the pairings that we know work, because we're just trying to build some positive momentum here?
I don't really see why I would have any urgency here to do this and to pair these two together. I'm with you.
Okay.
First off, there's so many freaking minutes in a game. And if the Donovan, Evan, Jarrett minutes, if that threesome wasn't working and didn't work last year, then I'd be like, okay, we have a problem, because these three are inherently going to have to share a lot of time on the floor together. Mm-hmm. However, I don't think that's true. It certainly wasn't true last year. So, what this is just a weird mix of styles. In basketball, is a stylistic sport. Donovan, when he is the lead playmaker, has always been a guy who excels at making the simple reads. You clear the board for him with a spread pick and roll, so his reads are easier in front of him, and he knows, I either attack, I hit the pocket pass, or I spray it out to the corner. Those are my three choices. And Evan doesn't really do a good job at presenting those three choices, because he adds a fourth or a fifth or a sixth choice. Oh, what if I slip and hang out in the high post? What if I dribble into a DHO? And it's like, it just messes. It overcomplicates the floor. And Jarrett's singularity of purpose as a rim attacker just vibes so well with Donovan. Mm-hmm. And it's not like they're going to play Mobley less minutes to keep him off the floor in Donovan only lineup, or in Donovan only lineups, because you can always just play more of those minutes with Darius and Donovan out there. I just think it's not hard to stack your lineups to make guys who play together in those minutes when you only have two of your core four on the floor. It's just, there's not that many minutes per game where you only have two out of the four. Most of the time, you're going to have three. That's just the way. That's just the way the lineups are going to work out. So, no, I see no need to work on this particular weakness, because I think the weakness is just built, it's inherent to the strengths of what the guys do. And to your other point, this is a team that just needs to play good basketball for extended stretches. Like, I didn't leave the New York Knicks series going, the Donovan Evan pairing when Darius and Jarrett are off the floor. No, like that's that they had bigger problems. That's almost like, I mean, that's only if a guy gets in foul trouble that you have to figure some of that stuff out.
Yeah.
Like, I just feel like that should be so far down their problem solving list that I'd rather just make the guys who fit together beautifully, like Darius and Evan, like Donovan and Jarrett, and just say, hey, how about you just do that, what you're really, really, really good at, when we don't have all four of our guys on the floor, or three of our four guys on the floor.
Yeah, and last year, those lineups occurred because, Garland and Mobley were usually kind of the first sub out, and then they would really prop up that second unit, and they did a terrific job of that. And this is unfortunately one of those spots where I was really hoping you disagreed with me, just
sorry, buddy.
I think that it's just better podcasting. And I thought Spencer made good points when we discussed it before, and he liked experimenting with it. And anytime there's something I don't agree with, I always try to think, what's an angle I'm not looking at? And one of the things that popped to mind is I think it's easier to keep Jarrett Allen on that minute restriction if he's the first sub out rather than Mobley, and maintain the minutes that way. So Darius is staying in his normal role and Jarrett subbing out, and maybe that's why this is occurring. But in general, like I think whenever that's not the case, if that is the primary factor here, like I agree that I think just from a skill set standpoint, it works so much better, and Darius does a good job of getting Mobley the ball in those situations, because I do feel like the stretches where Mobley's not getting the ball enough are because he's playing with just Donovan, and Donovan's looking to do what he does so well, and it doesn't complement Mobley as well as Darius's best does. So it's just one of those things that I've had an eye on. I keep a track of the substitution patterns and whatnot, and I just feel like when you have almost all of your high usage lineups are a net positive, the only one that's played over 20 minutes, Carter, that doesn't have a positive net rating, has Mobley and Mitchell without Garland and Allen. Like I think that's just the one mix of talent on this roster that doesn't seem to connect as well. Yeah,
absolutely. It's just, again, and Jarrett even helps guys like George Niang, like his clarity of purpose. Again, like I just can't give Jarrett enough credit, because it sounds like I'm saying like, oh, his game's simple. It's not. It's just he plays forcefully and pressures the rim on every dive. And
he's had such a great year since he's come back. I think I've been so happy with him.
Yeah, I've been really pleased with Jarrett. At just about every level of the game. I mean, he had a really nice mid-ranger against Detroit that felt a little quicker draw than years past.
19 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal. Like he was all over the place.
So like I just want to see them lean into what works really, really well for them. And then it's easier to experiment when you're like 7 games over 500 and you are already built a 15-point lead. I just how about we get to the stuff? Let's knock out the easy stuff first, before we start tinkering with more, advanced math.
Yeah. It's so funny because so often like the macro discussions we have like also manifest in the micro, right? Like when we talk about things aren't going well, so Donovan's trying to, will the team to win, be that star teammate, and sometimes it's to the detriment of the team, right? Where you want to continue playing good team ball. Sometimes that happens with the rotation with JB, right? Like, oh my God, like we really need a win here. So I start gripping a little tighter, and the rotation shortens, and sometimes, it ends up having the opposite effect. And to me, it's just one of those interesting things when you follow the NBA long enough and you kind of see the ebbs and flows throughout the season. And these are the habits that they're going to need to break. And a lot of it's going to come down to, developing the trust in the roster overall, developing the trust with your teammates. And the major ingredient, the main protein to that trust is usually continuity and time together. So hopefully we do have that.
Gosh, we could all use a little protein, Justin.
Oh yeah. I'm always looking for a protein score, Carter. Should we wrap it up there?
Yeah,
we've gone long. I just looked at the clock and
leave it at the protein. I didn't send you a DM suggesting we wrap 20 minutes ago, so we at least dodged that bullet this time.
Hell yeah. We'll be going live after the Magic game. I'm really interested to see how that one goes. As much as I hated seeing Orlando and Miami getting scheduled, I actually feel like that's what this team needs right now. Like, we need some quality wins. We need to test ourselves and see if we can, have success against teams that can give the Cavs troubles and are built in a way that will give the Cavs trouble. So really interested to see how that goes. Hopefully we'll be talking about a win on Wednesday. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on the YouTube. Make sure you like and subscribe. Click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you want to support us via podcast, leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.